the baker who burned down London. He left an oven alight and sparked off the Great Fire of 1666. In 1666, a devastating fire swept through London, destroying 13,200 houses, 87 parish churches, the Royal Exchange, Guildhall, and St. Paul's Cathedral. So how did it happen? But before continuing, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. For a humble tradesman, John Fariner had attained a special honor and reputation. He was baker to King Charles II, recently restored to the English throne after his exile in France. Fariner had been the royal baker for 5 years when, one evening in 1666, after another long and weary day, he climbed the stairs to bed above his bakery in Pudding Lane. He snuffed out his candle and settled down for a peaceful night's sleep. But as he slept, a flame still flickered in the bakery beneath. He had failed to damp down his bread ovens. The flame grew, and at 2 o'clock that morning, on September 2, 1666, the fire in the bakery sparked off one of the worst conflagrations in history, the Great Fire of London. Sparks rising from Fariner's establishment set fire to a pile of hay stacked in the courtyard of the nearby Star Inn and lit up the sky. Pudding Lane lay at the centre of an overcrowded area of Old London, and thousands of the local inhabitants were soon out in the streets watching the blaze. They were not unduly alarmed. Fires were common in this city of pitch-soaked timbers and lath and plaster constructions. Only the year before, King Charles had written to the Lord Mayor urging him to enforce more stringent fire regulations. But previous fire had fizzled out, and there was no reason to think that this one would be any different. Pudding Lane was a dumping ground for offal from nearby East Cheap Market, and no one of any note lived there. But it was close to the main road running down to London Bridge, so in the early hours of the morning the mayor was informed. When he arrived at the scene he was singularly unimpressed. "Pish," he said. "A woman might piss it out." Diarist Samuel Pepys was no more impressed. He was awoken by his maid at 3 a.m. at his house about 3/4 of a mile to the east near Tower Hill. He wrote of the fire in his diary. "I rose and slipped on my nightgown and went to her window and thought it to be at the backside of Mark Lane at the farthest, and so to bed again and asleep." Pepys carried the news of the fire to the court, and thereby to the king, when he arrived at his office in Whitehall shortly before midday. No one had bothered to tell the king before then. It was Sunday, after all. But any idea that the fire would fizzle out was soon dispelled. On Sunday afternoon the blaze reached the River Thames, and warehouses loaded with timber, oil, brandy, and coal exploded like bombs, one after another. A steady dry wind blew continuously from the east, so that, although the fire barely reached Pepys' house a short distance away, it spread uncontrollably to the west. There was one stage on the Sunday when the blaze might have been halted. But the firefighters smashed up the water pipes to fill their buckets more quickly and cut off the area's water supply. The inferno swept on unabated from Sunday to Wednesday. By then, 13,000 houses had been destroyed, 87 parish churches burned down, and 300 acres blackened. The shops built on London Bridge caught fire. Sparks carried across to the opposite bank of the Thames and started small fires in Southwark. The Guildhall and the Royal Exchange, the city's financial centre, were reduced to ashes. The greatest conflagration was at St. Paul's Cathedral, where the heat caused the stonework to explode and ancient tombs to burst open, revealing mummified remains. The cathedral's roof melted, and molten lead flooded down neighbouring streets. Remarkably, only 8 people died in the Great Fire London. Most citizens had plenty of time to flee. The roads were crammed with handcarts piled with belongings, and the surrounding countryside was one vast refugee camp. Pepys was among those who left the city. He wrote, "With one's face in the wind, you were almost burned with a shower of fire drops most horrid, malicious. Bloody flame. A smoke so great as darkened the sun at midday. If at any time the sun peeped forth it looked red like blood." By Wednesday night the fire had been virtually contained, largely due to the personal intervention of the king, who organized the firefighters in knocking down buildings to clear a firebreak. But London smoldered for weeks afterwards. Cellars were still burning 6 months later. Baker Farina's blunder did result in some good, however. The shameful slums of central London were wiped out in a single week. And the fire purged the last vestiges of London's previous disaster, the Great Plague of 1665, which had claimed 100,000 victims. That's our information for today. See you in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe, comment and share this video. Thank you for watching.